Yo guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make the perfect bassline melody.
I see the one for the
If you'd like access to lots of the drums and the presets used in this video, check out my website, link in the description, and also there's lots of helpful production items on my Patreon. Without further ado, let's get into the video. There's 4 things we want to focus on in this video. The first is the bass sound itself, so how the bass sounds when you're making it in Serum or whatever synthesizer you're using. The second is the melody that bass is creating. The third is the variation of the bass, so how many different types of basses do you want in the drop, or will the bass be replaced by something else such as vocals? And then finally, the swing in the track. So this can come from the bass note position or from the drums like hi-hats and percussion. What we're going to do is go through 5 different tracks that I've created, and in those tracks we're going to go through each element that I just described. So we'll go through the bass, the melody I've created, the bass variation, and then how I've added swing to it. And then hopefully you'll get an idea of what to do in your tracks and how to implement these ideas directly and make them sound more professional. Let's get on to the first track. The first track we're going to look at is One Further with Dynascope. Now let's listen to it once, and then we'll go through each point and see if you can figure out how I've implemented each idea into the drop.
I see the one for the
So let's start with the sound design. So the sound design, so if we look at the bass, it's a loop, and this is what it sounds like without any post-processing on. And then what I've done here is added post-processing. So I've added OTT, Satin, Trash, and then I have sidechained it and added a Pro L. And now listen to how it sounds now. And then I've picked a frequency that fits the bass sound best. So this frequency here. And then what I've done is edited it so that it wobbles, and this adds swing. So let's hear it. You see how it's wobbling? Like that. And that is the melody. It's that simple. I've got it playing the same note. And then at the final 4th bar, it changes slightly. And then for the bass variation, we just have a horn here playing at the end of each section to add variation. And then once these 8 bars are done here, I add variation. So now I've added slight variation to the bass. It goes up instead of staying the same. And then that repeats for the next 8 bars. And then another 8 bars here. We've got another variation where I add in more swing with a hat loop and change the bass again. Like that. And now if we look further into the swing on the drums, you'll see I've got a percussion element here. Which adds more swing and fits really well over this rolling bass sound. And then on top of that, I've added the vocal chops. which again complements the bass really well and adds that swing. And then overall I've hit all the points. So the sound design is on point with the post-processing. The melody is on point by just keeping a sustained note and then adding the bass variation and then switching it up every 8 bars. The bass variation is on point with the horn because there's at least 2 different types of sounds going on. And then the swing is on point with the wobble in the bass, then the percussion elements and the vocal elements, as well as some nice hi-hats to complement it. And then you've got more swing later on as well to add variation. And that's the first track done. Moving on to the next track. The next track I'm going to look at is the remix I did for the 38 by Barry. So if we look at this one, let's look at the bass. So let's break it down with the sound design. Got an initial bass sound. So we've got a nice variation with 2 different bass sounds. This first bass sound is 3 different layers. So we've got a sub bass and then 2 different basses. And then this bass here is just a single bass with a sub underneath it. And then if we go to the post-processing channel, you can see again I've used lots of post-processing and get an idea of the sort of plugins I use. So the sound design is on point for the basses, and then we've got an interesting melody going on here. So we're using F sharp, and then a little trick I like to use is the 1/3 step. So after like the initial bass hit here, you've got 3 notes in one beat. So it goes the 3 notes hit and then 3 notes hit on step afterwards. And then that's repeated. So the melodies, as you can see, are quite simple. It's what goes around it that makes it into a banger. And then I varied it with the so there's lots of variation happening in each bar. And then for the swing side of things, it's mainly in the hats and the effects here. If I just play the drums, the hats here, and the lightness of the clap is making it sound fluffy and swingy. And then the effects, if I add them in, along with the vocals, add more swing. Moving on to the next track. So the next track we're going to look at is Nuclear, which is on my latest EP on Crewcast. So let's listen to it. So again, I've used 2 different bass sounds. The whoop at the start, and then the pluck afterwards. Now this sound design again is simply 1 bass, another bass, and then the sub As you can see, very similar to what I've done in all my other tunes. If you want in-depth analysis of the post-processing, check out my other videos. And then the melody is a bit more complicated here. So again, we just have our standard wub on the first note, which is quite popular to use. And what we've done here this time is put the first pluck sound ahead of the kick. So it could have been here. What we've done is put the notes ahead of the kick here, and that automatically adds swing to it. Especially on this part here. This is getting a bit more complicated now, and what I'd recommend you do is have a play around with the position of your notes on the piano roll to see if you can get them to sound more swingy, and also have a play around with the envelope, so things like the sustain, decay, attack, and often if you shorten these down it will add more swing. So I'll just show you the melody. So this is the melody, and then the melody repeats itself, has variation whilst always staying in key. And then if you look here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars, and then we introduce another bass sound, which is a sample I found, heavily processed and changed around. And the reason I've done this is because I wanted to add the vocal sound, a big chunk of the vocal sound, at the end of the 8 bars. But I couldn't have the vocals going over this plucky sound because it wouldn't fit. It would just sound a complete mess. So I needed like a sustained bass sound for the vocals to sound clear over, and this fit perfectly. So in this track we've got 3 different bass variations. And then right at the end I've just added a little bit of variation to that bass to bring it into the next section. And then I've just repeated it again. Because there's 3 different varied things going on here, I decided that it would be okay to repeat this for the whole 16 bars, and then I added new variation in the last 8 bars. As well as a vocal chop here. So what else has added swing? The drums, definitely. And then all these little effects as well as the vocals. You can hear that little percussion hitting in the background again. Those percussion sounds are really effective at adding swing. As you can see, we've got sound design on point, melody on point, bass variation on point, and like 10 different things adding swing to it, making it sound bouncy. Alright, moving on to the next track. Now let's look at another track from my EP called Get Off My Line with Dpart. So unfortunately I've only got the vocal and the finished version of the track version at the moment, but I'll try and explain it as best as I can.
Assault the beat when I pepper it right. Get off my WhatsApp, get off my line.
So in this track, the sound design is completely on one bass sound only. So it's a wobble bass, and the melody is very simple. It just moves around.
Get off my what? Said get off my line.
So it repeats itself for the first bar, the second bar, the third bar, and then in the fourth bar it does a little bit of variation, and then it does the same again, and then after 8 bars the patch, the serum patch, is just put up some semitones and it repeats itself. And then for the final variation at 16 bars,
Said get off my line. Findy a funny man, get off my line.
there's a little break in the melody here, and it's got up more semitones, and then it pretty much just repeats itself. And each time it progresses, more and more vocals are being added to it. So there's not much swing needed to be added to this from the drum side of things, because the bass is a wobble and it's basically just creating all the swing it needs. So I've kept that to a minimal, and I've just added like some cool little effects every now and then. So this is just showing you that it's possible to make a track with one bass sound if that bass sound is really good and really consistent. But more often than not, you need multiple bass sounds in your track for it to sound good. It just really depends on the track. Every track is different. Moving on to the final track. The final track we're going to look at is Body Gyal, also from my EP on Crewcast. So let's take a listen.
Good body, girl, where your body look tight. Body look. Good body, girl, where your body look tight. For me and you, up inside this dance here tonight. Body look. Good body, girl, where your body look tight. For me and you, up inside this dance here tonight.
So again, we're following a very similar pattern to Nuclear. The first bass sound is the same as the other bass sounds, so all these bass sounds here in the first 2 bars are the same, but what I've done is added reverb to the first bass sound. And if you look here at the position, I've done this little trick again with these plucky sounds and started them a step after the bass, after a step after the kick, and then I've put it even, I've gone even further with this one and put it a little bit further, so 4 little blocks here, and then added it. And just experimented it until I found the thing that gives it the most swing. So if you listen, it just adds swing that you wouldn't normally get, like if it was here. Sounds like a completely different tune. And then I've created an empty section here for when the vocal comes back in. And then again, like in the Nuclear tune, I wanted a big vocal section in the drop, so I found this sustained bass that means the vocal can sit nicely on top of it. And then I've simply repeated that section for the first 8 bars, and then added minor tweaks in the melody. Literally just added 1 note, so it goes bum bum instead of bum 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 bum, and it's basically stayed the same like that. And then I've done 8 more bars. You can see a trend here. All my drops are consistently the same in structure. A very minor change in the melody again. And then that's the end of the drop. So again, with the swing side of things, we've got this bass sound adding its own swing just by the position of the bass. We've got the drums with the percussion and the hi-hats. Hi-hat added here. And then we've got lots of effects, which you can hear with the drums. And then you have 5 drops. Thank you for watching. If you'd like access to the drums and the presets I use in this video, head over to my website, check it out. Head over to my Patreon as well, check that out. And I'll see you all in the next one. Take it easy.